Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to our Mesa City Council study session for the afternoon of Monday, April the 18th. We welcome our council is mostly here. We're waiting for Mr. Thompson, and Mr. Luna is excused as he's out of town. The first item on our agenda, item 2A, is it's a presentation to provide direction. No, wait, I'm sorry. Item 1, before we get to that, is to review our agenda for our meeting later tonight upstairs. So please, I know we talked about this on Thursday, but council, we do currently have one item off of the consent agenda because of a conflict, but everything else right now is still on. But do we have any questions or any additional information about tonight's meeting?
Which item was removed?
It was Mr. Thompson declared a conflict over a plat.
Okay.
So
No, it's 8A, it's the one that's, I don't know what it was.
Before. Oh, yeah, 8A, right.
It's just a plat, yeah.
yeah.
It's,
I know we had a pretty good discussion about this on Thursday, so maybe there's nothing that's come up since then.
no,
We do have, just for your information, a few awards and recognitions to talk about, some proclamations, a National Volunteer Week, Arbor Day proclamation, and then we're proud of our city auditor's office. They, for the first time, have gone through a national peer review and got the good seal of approval. So we'll be giving Joe and his team a shout out upstairs on that. All right, well, if there's no questions on tonight's agenda, then let's go ahead and we'll start up on budget items, but also hearing more about getting ready for the election. So item 2A on our agenda for this meeting is a presentation and to provide direction on the proposed amendment to section 609 of the city charter related to procurement. Welcome, Ed and Kelly.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Ed Quiggins, Business Services Department Director, and I'm joined by Kelly Whittemore, our Deputy City Attorney. We're here today to talk to you about a proposed amendment, a charter amendment to Section 609, which is related to procurement. The section has 7 sections in it. It states our intent that we will do open and competitive procurement. Sections B and C talk about procurement methods and thresholds, and we'll get into those here shortly. Section D is a carve-out so that we can deal with emergencies that come up. It accepts the competitive process as well as the council. It moves the council approval from an approval beforehand to a ratification afterwards, which became very important during the pandemic. Section E allows cooperative purchasing, which we use quite frequently. And basically it says that if the cooperative agency uses the same general processes that we do, that satisfies our competitive bid requirements in sections B and C. Section F is electronic bidding. Again, we'll talk about that here shortly. And then Section G defines public notice as it relates to Section 609. 609 was in the original charter in 1967. The council approval and threshold at that point was $10,000 for materials. It was amended in 2004 by a vote of the people. The entire section was struck, and it increased the threshold for council approval as well as formal solicitations to $25,000. Because it's in the charter, to change that threshold would require a charter amendment and a vote of the people. The reason this has come up is our thresholds have fallen behind. So as you can see on the slide, Phoenix, Tempe, and Gilbert are all up at $100,000. Maricopa and Chandler have mixed thresholds. Scottsdale is at $25,000, but they've expressed they are interested in looking at their thresholds in the coming year. And then we are down at the bottom with Queen Creek at $25,000. And during the CARES, when we were using federal funds, the federal requirement is at $250,000. So because of the way the federal rules are required, things that we could have done easier with the federal dollars, we have to use our own threshold. So while the federal threshold was $250,000, we had to use the $25,000 threshold for the processes to use that money. And as you can imagine, the processes directly relate to the amount of effort and to the process, the length of time it takes to get materials and services in the hands of our departments that need them. Today's threshold at $5,000 is a small purchase that is basically a single quote, as long as it is fair and competitive. $5,000 to $25,000 requires 3 quotes. We go to 1 to 5 days to process those. For any materials over $25,000, we are required to do formal solicitations. So a bid generally would require about 5 weeks. That's about 2 weeks to put the scope of work together with the department. We use a minimum of 2 weeks out on the street for the vendor community to find it and respond. And then because it's a bid, we only generally use about a week to determine who the low responsive and responsible bidder is. For a proposal, we add some time because we generally put the proposals out for a minimum of 3 weeks, because the vendor community not only needs to find it and respond, but generally it's a longer process for the vendor community to respond. They're usually responding with a lot more text attachments. They're trying to convince us that they are the best solution for our problem, not just the best price. So it takes them longer, but then when we get the responses, it does take us longer to evaluate those responses so that we can bring an award recommendation forward.
Ed, before you leave that slide.
Yes, sir.
This timeline, this process, where is that dictated from? It's not the charter that we are seeking to amend that mandates this process, is it? Is it state procurement laws, or is it a city ordinance that dictates this, or where does it come from?
So we pretty much follow what the state does. We haven't adopted the state procurement code, but we mirror it. And that is a model, it's the ABA, American Bar Association procurement model, and it's generally accepted and followed across the country.
And is that where these timelines come from?
The 2-week formal solicitation and the 3-week minimum for proposals, that is pretty consistent, but that is our determination that that's what we want. Many proposals, because of their complexity, are actually longer. The AMI proposal that we did not too long ago, that was several months by the time we allowed adequate time for that grand scope of work, but as well questions and
Those
answers.
automated meters, that was the meters that
Correct,
were
the
transitioning
advanced
to
meter infrastructure. So that was quite complicated, and that was actually several months that it was out on the street. So we look at minimums, 2 weeks for a bid and 3 weeks for a proposal.
So this policy was, where did it come from?
Okay, so, yeah, so it gets developed internally and with our policies that Ed develops, but we try to follow best practices across the country, or at least in this area, I guess, in Arizona maybe.
It's across the country.
Across the country. So these are all related to that. I think the point here is to say for a $25,000 purchase, it does take a lot of time and effort, and just the fact, I think we're going to get to the proposal is, the idea is when we set these thresholds for approval, here's what comes with it, right? It's not just the dollar amount, but it's the effort it takes to procure. So there's a balance in here, and I think when you see the proposal for what we want to change, regarding the limitations, I think what we're looking for is flexibility, right? Because $25,000 in 2004 is different than $25,000 in 2022. But with it comes all these processes. And I don't know that the processes are going to change dramatically regardless of the threshold, because it's important for us to still have competitive processes. We don't want departments splitting up bids and trying to get under the threshold. But we recognize, on the other hand, when we say we send out proposals, a lot of times we're working with our local vendors. Mayors, you've been in those meetings where we've invited local Mesa businesses to try to make sure they're informed and know when, but we need to give them a chance to respond to the bid proposals, document that they have the materials, the labor, whatever it is we're asking for. So that's what this is.
So the reason I asked the question is because, I mean, originally when this was put into the city charter by the freeholders, you know, back in 67, it was meant to, as a safeguard against fraud and embezzlement, right? And that we're gonna have, anytime there's a large purchase, you know, it's gotta come before the city council, and the light of sunshine will, you know, prevent backroom deals. And so that's a good policy.
And we're not, yeah, that philosophy is, we're not
Right.
suggesting that's,
I know, but I guess my question is, when we raise this threshold, we still need to be able to tell people, you can trust us, we can safely raise the threshold, because look at all the safeguards.
oh, we
that
still
you
have all these will stay in place,
So
yes.
I'm saying,
Yes.
how do I justify when I'm explaining to people why we did this? I say, well, state procurement laws, internal City Mesa ordinances, internal we've got several different safety nets here that are preventing fraud from occurring, and that's part of the story that we need to be able to tell here.
Yeah, and Mayor, it's not just, I guess fraud is certainly one of those issues, but it's also making sure we're being, doing our best to get the best
Right.
pricing for the city, right? And competitive, yeah, that's the way of saying it.
Yeah.
So certainly fraud is a concern, but frankly, what we want to make sure here is we are getting the most competitive pricing for whatever services or commodities we're looking for.
So that's my question. We can raise this threshold because there's
We
already
still have, yes,
several
we'll
different
retain all these
hoops
in there.
that need to be jumped
Yes.
through, right?
Yes.
And so what are those hoops?
Well, and Mayor, the charter currently states that that all the procurements that we would do would have to be in the best interest of the city. And so that type of language would maintain, that it's the intent and policy of the city that we have open and competitive procurement methods. But there's the charter, and then there's the city ordinance on procurement. After that, we have Management Policy 200, and then we have the actual policies and procedures that go with the more practical application of how we do those procurements. So there's multiple levels that this would all go through.
And none of those will change.
No, none of
Yeah.
those would change.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear you say. Mr. Thompson?
Having worked in the procurement world for quite a while, honestly wouldn't mind seeing that threshold raised, because it costs companies a lot of money to do bids. I mean, sometimes, depending on the perplexity of the project, it could exceed $25,000 just for somebody to put a bid together. I know when I bid on projects, it takes me nearly 2 weeks to get my bid together just to send out, and that's time away that I'm not spending with other clients, that I'm just strictly focused on putting that bid together, and it can be quite extensive and exhausting. So I wouldn't actually mind seeing the threshold raised a bit to be able to accommodate those companies that are bidding, because it does cost a lot of money to put a bid together.
Right. And as you'll see, Mayor and Council, what we're proposing is not giving you, we're not even proposing a new number, right? What we're proposing is that council in the future, by ordinance, can establish that number, whatever, you know, if it's next year, or 15 years from now, or 30 years, whatever, that the council, by ordinance, the charter will allow them to set that, as well as, you know, we talk about it, in the code we have procurement rules, we have several layers. We're not asking to be less transparent processing, we're just creating that threshold where we have to bring it to council and go through that schedule, putting it on the agenda, you know, waiting the time to put it on the agenda. So because there's a lot of purchases that happen underneath that council never comes before council, and that's really what we're proposing. But we're absolutely not proposing to change the process or the requirements we have to go through to make sure we get the best competitive deal.
Great. I know we stopped you in the middle of your presentation. Why don't you go ahead and finish, and then I'm sure we'll have some more questions for you.
So the proposed amendment would simplify this charter language. Currently, sections B and C relate to the thresholds for both council approval as well as the formal solicitation process. But we think we can simplify that, basically putting things in two categories: large purchases and small purchases. Large purchases would still come to the council, whatever that threshold happens to be in the future, whether it stays at 25,000 or it's raised by the council. And then it would also, the purchases would also have to follow our competitive procurement processes. Small purchases, we think we can do better with the language, but basically those purchases are made in compliance with policies and procedures established by the city manager and his designees. And I should point out that there's a parallel here. There's my side of the house on procurements, and there's Beth's side of the house on engineering procurements. They're both governed by this section and these thresholds. We're also looking at eliminating Section F, electronic bidding. The concept was new and innovative in 2004, but everybody's doing everything electronically in 2022. So we really don't need that carve out and language in the charter. Then we're also looking at doing some minor cleanup language in other sections. They are not material, but they're cleaning up some wording and some language in the intent, cooperative purchasing, and the public notice section. In the public notice section, there's a word that I absolutely hate, notwithstanding. I always have to look it up in the dictionary when I actually read that to find out what it means. We could find a better word. So the timeline, if the council is so inclined here today, we will put an ordinance for introduction on your agenda for May 2nd, consideration on May 16th, and that would place it on the ballot as a proposition on the general election on November 8th.
And Mayor and Council, when the ordinance is actually introduced, you'll get the opportunity to see the actual language. So it would include everything that would be changed in the actual charter amendment we would propose.
And you can see behind your PowerPoint presentation today, if you want to go see the language from the existing sections and the proposed sections. It didn't fit well on a PowerPoint, but if you want to get into that detail, it's available for you. So Mayor and Council, this is just something we've been talking about for a long time, but it's, when's the right time to bring this forward? We have actually maybe half a dozen other proposed charter amendments that we'll be bringing to you over the years. But this kind of rose to the level as one that really would help us modernize our purchasing, processing, and expediting process, especially for these, lower value price commodities or purchases. But we do think it would be important for the council. We can have future discussions with the council to establish that threshold. It could stay the same, or it could be adjusted to any number above that. But it would be up to the council. And we think this is good not only for us today, but it sets the stage for future councils and city operations.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman.
So my question was in 1967, materials over $10,000, what would that translate in 2022 value?
Ooh, I didn't do
Come
that
on, I thought you'd have
calculation.
that answer.
I'm sorry.
I mean, to Kevin's point about raising the
Yes.
threshold, I mean, I see value in that. And then part of me thinks about how many bids that we did not get to be competitive in certain of these price points. In other words, vendors wanting to bid, but to Kevin's point, why should I bid? Because it's going to cost me more to get the bid if, go through the exercises to bid.
Correct, and I think that's a reason that these other agencies have raised their thresholds as well for exactly what you said.
So I was going to ask you to give us an idea of what the bidding process is, maybe a small.
$85,000, $84,742.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. I was just going to give an example of maybe you gave the more complex one, the AMI, right? Mm-hmm. But yet a smaller one. Give us an example of the bidding process.
Sure. So the department will identify their need, and they'll submit a request to us, and purchasing will begin to work with them to develop specifications and put them in the boilerplate. In general, it's going to take a couple weeks back and forth with the documents.
And do you have a specific example of a type of purchase that might fall into at the lower level?
Oh.
What kind of commodity, what can you think of that kind of falls into that? Tools?
Chemical supplies.
Maybe chemicals are a little higher.
Soap, hand sanitizer.
Yes, those are all good examples. I'm trying to think what the commodity was. I had one the other day that was $26,500, and I had to put it, and I think it's coming up on your May 2nd agenda. And that one was like, really, it's so small. but I'm going to have to eat up your time to put it on the agenda. But it is, you're exactly correct. It's the small items, and I'm just drawing a blank on what those
That's fine.
commodities would be.
All right, you answered my questions, thanks.
Ms. Pillsbury?
So you're not raising the threshold then to a certain number?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the charter will read $25,000 or an amount established by the council. And when the council considers any change in the future, we can consider a change to the solicitation process separately from the council process, if that's the will of the council, or we could raise it like several of these other agencies have so that they're the same number on both sides.
So why wouldn't we look at just raising the price for the?
We could, we certainly could, but our thinking is, let's solve this for future councils too.
Okay.
Let's give the council that permission or authority.
We don't want to put another
opportunity,
dollar amount.
So we don't have to keep going back to a vote. It just seems like this is an operational issue.
Oh, so if we did it to 50, then they'd have to go again to make it to 100 or?
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
Versus
so-
if we do it this way, if this were to be approved by the voters, we come back in January, we come up with a policy, we would recommend a number.
That would be
council
good
by
for how
ord-
long?
So long until the council wants to change it again,
Oh, okay. So if we changed it to 100,000 at that point or something?
or whatever it might be, then the council would, that would be the number until sometime that, staff came back to council and said, hey, we need to change it, whatever, and then, but it would be the council's decision to make. This does not seem like it fits, and we think about all the things that charter deals with, this seems like one that the council could make that decision on.
Okay, so the language is being changed for the council to decide what the number is.
Yeah,
Correct.
And Councilmember Spilsbury, it'd be done via ordinance, so the public would get the opportunity to
Right.
weigh in on it twice with both the introduction and the adoption. So
Okay.
it couldn't be changed without that.
And we don't want to put another dollar amount in the charter, because again, as Mr. Brady said, that would require us to go back with a
We know
charter
it'll change.
amendment and a vote of the public again to change it.
Okay.
So really, we could approve this on the ballot, and the council could do nothing, and it'd stay at 25,000. But at least it would give, at some point in the future, an opportunity for the council to make that change.
Because I guess I'm just thinking about how like the public perceives it, right? So is this a good thing, or does this make the public even more wary of what the council would do in the future, giving that much power to the council, I guess?
But the council already has that power, right? Because
Okay.
if you don't.
By ordinance.
Well, today, at least I found one item.
Okay.
You would have to approve those either way, right? You're either going to approve the threshold, or it's going to show up on your
Or the
agenda,
amount.
and you're going to approve it. You're going to be the ones that are making that decision.
Because all of the items on our consent agenda every other week are things that we're approving
It could include something like
anyways.
that, yes.
Okay.
That fall under this, or exceed the threshold, right?
Which I think a lot of times in the public, they don't even understand that we're voting on things like that every week or whatever,
And
so.
it really does help us with efficiency for our operations. There's just a lot of things that fall between that, above that number now, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heredia?
On the language on the public notice, is it standard to have at least one? Could we say at least two? Because constantly you hear, I didn't hear about a request for a proposal or, a small business in Mesa that wants to get into applying for a contract or one of these RFPs. Can we expand the public notice to add maybe an additional distribution method in changing from at least one? Or what's the standard, I guess, that other cities have around public notice?
So more and more agencies are moving away from placing ads in newspapers because people just don't read the newspapers like they used to. So in our case, we send an email to everyone who has registered with us, as well as those who are registered with the state of Arizona for that commodity. Okay. And then we have it on our website the entire time that solicitation is out on the street. So from the published date to the due date and time, it's on our website.
So right now, we're doing at least 2 website and whatever email lists that we have.
So all those that have
for
registered,
those vendors.
yes.
Okay.
And we've worked really hard. I don't know what our latest, we used to have the small business, we used to join with Mesa Public Schools and try to help develop the registry of
Yes.
local small businesses, so
And we're creating the small business, the business registry, right?
and that's
So-
another way, I know Jay does a lot of that
Yep.
work to try to connect with those small businesses with our procurement process.
And as well, the chamber has signed up for all of our bid registrations, so they get a notification on everything we publish.
Okay. I don't know if we should codify that we do, just as a best practice, more than one. Is that something that, is there limited to just saying just one, and can we do more than?
You're talking specifically about the under 5,000, right? Or is
Chris, I
this-
think in that in the last section of the charter, it states that they'll
Oh,
use
I'm
at least
sorry, I'm the wrong-
one method.
So cute.
And Mayor and Council Member Hardy, and that, the use of one, and it's sort of confusing, that language, and maybe it's, and when you read it in the context of the next sentence, it's one time using a method that are reasonably available, not necessarily just it's going to one, one newspaper or one website. Sure. And what I would suggest is that, that because the charter is in many ways so inflexible and so difficult to change, that we could make these changes to the charter, and then we can embed other changes within the city code that says the number of, which is the second sentence there, the concept that the methods include multiple different methods, and that in the city code, we can articulate that more fully. And in fact, we could do that, because we're gonna have to come back, if this charter change happens, we'll come back with a change to the city code, most probably, and part of that can include also, additional notice requirements, especially if it's going through this other process. And it may include other other processes to keep council informed, just like council is informed of job order contracting, JOCs, right? So council gets updated on all the JOC contracts that go up. So there could be aspects of that too embedded into the city code. And that's where we'd probably put those type of changes in the city code, as opposed to embedding them in the charter. That's obviously more difficult to ever change.
Okay. Yeah, my thing is if we can broadcast whatever we have as far as RFPs to.
We don't disagree. This is just talking about
different
the
ways.
method of
Yeah.
getting there. We
Okay.
we definitely are trying, and we provide, do we still do the sales tax calculation for Mesa purchases? So we try to give a benefit to local Mesa businesses, because if we're collecting sales tax, we use that to credit the amount too. So we're all in, and we can
Okay.
get Mesa businesses. Matter of fact, your agenda tonight, I think I said $900,000 worth of trailer purchases from Empire. So that's a big deal for us too.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think, again, this is to provide direction. I think the consensus is that we do want to come back and vote to refer this to the ballot. I will just repeat myself and what some others have said here. I think ultimately the voters have to approve this. And so we need to, it's not just us making this decision, it's doing it in a way that communicates to the voters that we're not adopting a more lax standard in the way we scrutinize and the way that we go out and do procurement. We're just catching up to the inflation and recognizing that there's already a lot of safeguards in place. So I think the challenge here will be messaging. I could see that we refer this to the ballot and it loses because people think, oh, well, why would we remove safeguards, from purchasing for the city of Mesa? That seems foolish. So we need to make sure that it's clear that that's not what we're doing here.
Especially when there's already distrust in the community or in population in general for government. I think that would be really important to make sure that messaging gets out really clearly.
Amen. Mr. Thompson?
Do we still fall under state procurement law anyway, though? I mean, because you can't exceed what the state has adopted already, right, under Title 23?
So I have two lawyers sitting to my left, but we have not adopted the state procurement code for general procurements, but construction does have to follow Title 41.
Title 34.
34, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But that's, Councilmember Thompson, that's the purpose of our own code and our policies and procedures, is so that we can have those safeguards put in place that we establish ourselves.
And council approves the local, our Mesa code on purchasing, right?
They approve they approve the ordinance that is our local ordinance, and then we also have Chris's management policy that he sets forth, and then under that we have all the policies and procedures that are established.
But I guess what I'm getting at is, without having our own ordinance, we would fall under the procurement laws for the state, correct?
Correct. Title 41 for
So,
regular procurements.
either way, the citizens would be protected,
Yes.
because we can't supersede state law anyway, correct, in procurement?
Because we're a charter city and we've adopted this in our charter for non-construction purchases, this is where our guidance lies.
Thank you. Well, we're looking forward to bringing back something that communicates that this is still,
And Mayor, maybe one of the things we need to do too is go talk to the chambers and other small businesses about this idea and make sure that they understand it too, that see it as a benefit, because we do see it as a benefit for small business, right? It'll help get the work of the city done much faster and get that, you know, you could get a proposal from a small business for over $25,000, but it may take a month or more before we actually get to the point where the council's approved it, and then, so we'll work on that part of
yeah,
it.
that's a good message. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda, item 2B, is a presentation to provide direction on the environmental management and sustainability budget, including the Mesa Climate Action Plan. Scott, good to have you back. You brought Sherry and Laura with you?
I
looks like.
did. All right, good morning, or good morning, sorry. I'm used to Thursdays. It is not morning. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Scott Boucher, Director of Environmental Management and Sustainability, and I do have the two deputies with me today, Sherry Collins, who's the Deputy Director over the Solid Waste Division, and Laura Heineman, who's the Deputy Director over the Environmental and Sustainability Division. So start off with the department's purpose is to provide a clean, healthy environment for our community with a focus on reducing carbon emissions, increasing use of renewable energy, and reducing waste. As you see, this department purpose lines up very well with the climate action plan that Mesa has, the Mesa Climate Action Plan, and so we will be discussing that after the department budget update. There is another portion on the climate action plan. And I did want to just take one moment to thank the department. It's been a challenging couple of years for folks in both divisions, whether it's our support services and solid waste, the operations, admin staff, or the division in environmental and sustainability. So I just want to make sure that they understand that their hard work is noticed and appreciated. So I wanted to just take a quick moment for that. With that, I'll go right into our performance measures, first with solid waste. So the top one is the household hazardous materials facility and the number of users that we have that are using that facility. We were just looking at the data for this. I can tell you that from the last year that we held events, we actually have about twice as many users of the facility as what we had when we did events. And then our diversion rate that we're able to accomplish with the facility is much higher, because at the end of those events, pretty much everything was getting thrown away because we had to get out of the parking lots that we were working out of. In addition to that, so this is a group, staffing has been challenging over the last couple of years for it seems like everybody, but this is an area that is fully staffed at this point, so we do plan on doing some more outreach to the community to make them aware of the facility, because we still do find that there are some Mesa residents who aren't aware that this facility is available for their use. So with that, the next performance measure that we have is our barrel diversion rate. So we've talked about recycling a lot, and actually in this presentation we have a recycling update, where you'll see that there's been a drop. Consistently, we were above 20% with our blue barrel diversion rate, and that was pretty consistent across the board for years. You'll see that first drop that happens is when Republic Services, just to remind you, when their recycling facility burned at the Salt River. And then the second drop that you see is a combination of Waste Management had canceled a contract with us, and then because of staffing and COVID issues, the amount of material that we were dealing with, we were combining the blue and green barrels for a long period of time. We do have contracts in place. Like I said, we will give you a recycling update. We do have a recycling contract in place, so you do see that number's come back up, and we're anticipating that it will come up even more in 2023. For environmental and sustainability, some of the performance measures. So the top one is energy used across all city buildings. And you can see there's a downward trend associated with energy use in the city buildings. That's even with a growing city and new facilities coming on, and that's because of the hard work that's been done, not only in Laura's group in environmental and sustainability, but working with our facilities folks and also working with the IT folks with building automation systems. Renewable energy is the next one, so it's renewable energy. This is energy that's produced by systems that the city either owns or we have solar service agreements with. So those were the ones where, like at Fiesta PD, Solar City, now Tesla, had come in and built the solar arrays, and they own, they operate them, and we just pay for the energy that's generated from those. You will see that we have missed the mark on some of our goals with this, but again, there isn't actually a proposal when we get to the climate action plan of adding some more solar that's owned by the city. And then in addition to that, what's not included in this, we just had a meeting today with SRP. So if you recall, we did have it's what we refer to it as the SEO. It was a sustainable energy offer from SRP, in which the city purchased 5.5 megawatts from a utility scale solar system. That solar system is online and running, but what we're working with SRP now is on the reporting of how much of that is dedicated to the city of Mesa and being able to make sure that that data gets put into our performance metrics. We thought it would be a little bit easier than what it has been, but SRP has been very open in making sure that we're able to get that information so that we can share it not only with the council, but with the community, because most of these performance measures are on the open data portal so that the community can see the work that we are doing as far as sustainability. And then the last one is sustainability public outreach. So this is engagement that we have with the community, whether one-on-one at our events, things that we do with Mesa Public Schools, and really trying to get the message out as far as sustainability and the work that the city is doing, and then also what residents can do themselves to be more sustainable to help us meet those goals that we have. All right? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry, who's going to talk a little bit about the solid waste enhancements.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to go over our budget enhancement request for 2023 or 22-23 for solid waste. We have, with our growing city, we have some additional requests this year. We have some staffing requests, and of that is 8 additional equipment operators and 1 routing specialist. In addition to that, we have equipment that we're requesting, growth equipment, so 2 front load trucks for our commercial side. We have a container truck for our commercial side, which is moving the bins, delivering the bins, and then on the residential side, we have 1 ASL truck. An ASL truck is an automated side loader, so it services the barrels in front of the residents.
Mr. Thompson?
On the 8 additional operators, I mean, we're struggling right now to keep operators. What is your plan to not only fill the vacancies, but add another additional 8 operators for our trucks?
So currently, we do have some openings currently, but what we're doing with those is we are getting applications. So people are still applying, going through the process, and so we are able to fill those positions. So we have confidence that we'll be able to fill these 8 additional operators as well. So we are getting plenty of people applying.
Because we got the email, I guess, this morning that the blue and greens were being picked up at the same time, and that all that was going to be landfilled because we're having issues with employees, not having enough employees. So I just want to make sure that if we approve additional 8, that you're able to fill those additional 8 and get us back on target.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, we will be able to fill those positions.
Okay.
Is that why we're picking up the blues and the blacks together?
Is that staffing or is that recycling?
It's a staffing issue today.
Okay.
So
Today.
we have contracts in place that we can bring our material to a facility, but we are struggling with maintaining our staffing levels. We are getting applications, but they're coming in by the time we're able to fill the positions. Like a perfect example is in the last 2 weeks, we were down to 1 position that we had open, but I think now we're up to 5 operator positions
Correct.
that are open now. Some of those are retirements where folks we do have an aging force in solid waste, and folks that have put in 20 or 25 years are retiring, and we're happy for them to be able to retire. And then we are seeing some folks who are getting other opportunities because CDL drivers are in such demand that they have other opportunities and have left the city.
And Scott, that's an open recruitment, right? Do we close that for periods of time, or where are we at?
We had it open continuous, and then we got it down to 1 that we thought we were at, and then as soon as we did that, we had more that opened up. So we're going to be doing interviews. Sherry and I just had this conversation this morning. We're doing interviews next week. We think we'll deplete that list down to a point that it's going to be reposted again.
So one of the things we sometimes do when we get to this point, we just keep the positions open. We don't have like a closed date, just so because of turnover and recruitment. So we'll continue to look at that.
And that has been helpful because we have had some operators who are recruiting for us, who are actively recruiting other folks that they know in the industry and telling them it's a good place to work and they should apply here. So when it is a continuous open, it's nice that they're able to do that and not have to wait for that next round.
So I know in the private sector sometime, it's that, once you're interviewed to the actual hire date can take forever. Is that the case here as well? Or are we, as soon as we interview someone, are we trying to get them into the seat and get that position filled? Other words, is there a time commitment that we as council can help eliminate to help get basically butts in seats quicker?
The HR department's wonderful to work with. We work hand in hand with them. They understand the struggles that we're going through. What we notice a lot of times is the drug test, the background checks, things that are required in order for them to be able to work will take time. And, we encourage folks typically not to put in their notice until they've passed through those, because I would hate for somebody to end up on the wrong end of putting in notice and then us having to pull our offer to them. And then by the time they give their 2 weeks, that it does end up extending out. And that's where, 2 weeks ago, we had 1 position open, and I think 2 of those folks maybe have started, 1 has started, and 1's maybe next week. But we've had multiple that have left. So sometimes it is a situation where you feel like you're kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But we are trying as hard as we can to get folks in. And we have been getting a lot of interest with folks with solid waste experience, so it's been encouraging, but it has been a long haul. That's one of the reasons, I'll be honest, that's one of the reasons I gave that thank you in the beginning, is because there's a lot of operators who have been working a lot of hours.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
I have a quick question. On the trucks, are these CNG fueled, or what is the fuel source for the trucks?
Yes, they would be CNG.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the next slide I'm going to cover is an overview of our expenditure summary for the solid waste side. Our proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23, there is an increase from where we think we'll end this year by about a little over $1.5 million. We have 3 major cost driving factors in solid waste. That's our salaries, our landfill fees, and then our fleet services fees. So in the 23 proposed budget, those 8 positions are in there, and then we have updated the FTE count to 159, which would show the routing specialist in the 8 positions. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Laura Heineman.
Quick question on the side before you get to this. Yeah. And the household hazardous waste, I see for the 22-23 budget, actually a decline of 300,000. Is that right?
Yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor Duff.
Okay.
So with the household hazardous waste budget, the way that it's budgeted is we'll budget it to what we believe the revenue will be. But then whenever we true up 21-22, we'll go back and we'll add that funding to that. So it's just a matter of timing on that. So the budget will become whole again once fiscal year 21-22 closes. We'll take any carryover revenue that wasn't spent in there, carryover money, and we'll add that to the 22-23 budget. So there's just a little bit of a lag of when it's recorded.
Okay.
So Sherry, is
I
this
see.
a net number, or is this your expenditure number?
So the proposed budget is the revenue that we anticipate to collect for next year. And we always set it to the revenue because it is a dedicated activity. So we take that activity and spend it towards the household hazardous materials. Correct.
This is the environmental management and sustainability summary for our division. It clearly shows the environmental activities and the core business processes. The category of sustainability includes our water conservation energy conservation, and climate action activities. I wanted to point out a couple things about this, our expenditures over the last year. A year ago, more than a year ago, we removed the last 2 single-walled underground storage tanks for fuel. And so we used, having done that, we felt comfortable taking $446,000 out of the storage tank program and moving it over to the fleet electrification program. So the electrified fleet reduces our reliance on fossil fuels, reducing tailpipe emissions, but it also reduces that risk of spills and costly cleanups. And that transfer from our storage tank program to the engineering program that we started kind of explains that difference between the 2.2 and the 2.7. I also wanted to let you know that it's been a very busy year for the sustainability team. We hired a temporary part-time marketing specialist to help us with our climate action community outreach this year, and she is a former PIO, and she also assisted us with our water conservation messaging over the last year.
Laura?
Yes.
Sorry. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Asbestos and lead. Is lead still a big issue in our city? And what measures and how do we remedy it?
Lead, not so much. We did have a lead project somewhat recently because there was a project occurring in the Broadway Rec Center. But by far, most of that budget is spent on asbestos removal.
What we find most of the time with the lead-based paint is we're doing sampling to comply with regulations that exist, but we don't find a lot of lead-based paint in the facilities. But there are requirements that we have to do if it's a child-occupied facility to make sure before we do renovations that we're not disturbing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and now I'm going to come back to you guys with recycling updates. So currently with our recycling, we have a contract in place with United Fibers for 12,500 of our annual tons, which is the maximum amount they can take. That contract currently costs us $35 per ton when there is no revenue share. And that contract expires at the end of this year, and we do not have any renewal terms left. So that leaves us one for what we're going to do in the future. So we're going to go out for an RFP for the recycling materials, and we intend to include and partner with Gilbert on this endeavor. What that will do is put a contract in place in January of 2023 for our recycled materials, and the goal is to have a home for all of our recycling materials by January of 2023. In addition to that, we've been working with a consultant on a feasibility study. The feasibility study is not only looking at trash, but it's also looking at recycling. The goal of the feasibility study is to add efficiencies to our operations, look for long-term certainties, and then give us the ability to be flexible with the materials that we handle. So what I want to do is start off by showing you what our city currently looks like. If you look up here on this map, the orange square on the left is our current West Mesa yard where we deploy all of our vehicles from each day. Surrounding the city are those other colored shapes, and that shows you all of the post-collection facilities around the city of Mesa. So we have post-collection infrastructure around the city of Mesa, but we don't own and operate any ourselves.
And one of the ones at the top that you'll see that helps change this a little bit, we have been informed that Republic Services has permits to reconstruct their recycling facility at the Salt River landfill. And so we still don't have a date yet that they're beginning construction, but they have been signing contracts with other valley municipalities, ensuring that they'll be open at least by the summer of '23. They anticipate being open earlier than the summer of '23, probably the beginning of the year of '23, that Republic facility will be coming online.
Scott, I have one question. Are we still considering to do a regional MRF?
Yes.
Okay.
There is we'll have a conversation. I think that's getting into
another
the next
slide.
part of the recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
So working with the consultants, there are a few recommendations. Their final report should be out this week, but we still have some data from it. So their recommendations are a phased approach. The first phase to that being splitting the operations between East Mesa Service Center and West Mesa Service Center to create efficiencies in our operations. And the next one is the possibility of a transfer station or a MRF. So with their first recommendation on the phased approach, I wanted to show you how we operate today. So again, the orange square is where we deploy all of our vehicles from today. So this is what it looks like on a typical week for solid waste. So some of those traveling distances, as you can see, are pretty far, especially in the east and southeast. And it takes us around 1,100 miles a week just to get to our first stop on the route. And then the next slide is going to show you what we've been working with with a consultant. So the initial recommendation is to move forward with splitting our operations, and this is what it would look like. So you can see a lot of those travel distances become much shorter, a lot easier to handle, and then our mileage goes down to 650 miles a week just to get on route. So we're saving about 450 miles each week just by splitting the operations. There's already an existing facility in East Mesa Service Center, so it's a city-owned facility. It would include tenant improvements, a CNG station, and then upgrades to fleet so that they would be able to work on our vehicles out there. So next steps on this is for the East Mesa, West Mesa split. The funding has been identified for the design of that, which was presented in next year's CIP budget. And then as far as the MRF and transfer station, so we will be working on regional partnerships with the communities around us and having discussions with them. And once the feasibility study is finalized, which again should be this week, the city manager has directed us to meet with our neighboring communities to see how we can make this a possibility.
Sherry, just quickly though, we already know from the consultant's report that building a MRF just for Mesa, at least for that part, down that part of Mesa, if it's only Mesa, it doesn't quite, based on the cost to build a MRF, and that's a big number, it doesn't pencil out for us, right? It's not a good business decision to invest that much in a standalone facility. Just, again, the infrastructure, the concrete, the buildings, all that. So, and based on the volumes of recycling we'd be bringing there. So it doesn't really make sense for us, at least at this time, based on our projections of recycling. But it wouldn't take much to imagine partnering with communities in that area. I've already spoken with the city managers and Gilbert and Chandler about the possibility, would they be open to a presentation from us about developing maybe a cooperative agreement for MRF, and they're definitely open to that. So I think we're going to finish up the consultant's report. Yep. We're going to put a presentation together and then bring them to the table and pitch it to them as a opportunity for region, because they're looking for the same opportunities, right? And so we hope that this will be something similar to what we do at a Greenfield wastewater treatment plant. We do a lot of things where we join together to make it work. So we're optimistic that will be something we can work on in the future.
I guess my only concern with the MRF is just the smells that are associated with that.
It's going to be right next to a rail track, so I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, but it's also right next to a bunch of businesses. In that Pecos Road overlay area.
Yeah, well, we'll look at it. I think we're pretty far away, and where we're sitting this, we're trying to really isolate it from that. So, okay. And this is recycled, so there's not a lot of, are there a lot of organics in this?
There shouldn't be.
Good answer. Thank you for that. So yeah, that's not what we would be bringing here, right? So hopefully it's mostly plastics and metals and like that. So it's the blue barrel, right? It's the blue barrel, cardboard, plastics, metal. Those would be the predominantly what we'd be looking for.
Other questions?
I just want to endorse the splitting the fleet. Seems like an obviously good idea, so I certainly support that. And MRFs are also pretty expensive, as I understand it. The last few estimates we've seen have also, just kind of made obvious that we can't do it ourselves. We need to have a regional approach. So my goal would be that we would look for the 2024 bond election, but that we have until then to strike some regional deals and then come back hoping to pitch to the voters that we have a regional MRF on the ballot for our bond election in 24. So I'll just throw that out there.
Some cities, I know, across the nation and just meetings and being in the EENR, NLC committee, they're using ARPA dollars to address recycling issues like MRFs. of course, that with a regional partnership, they would be an agreement. Everybody's putting their dollars together in a similar fashion, which would be more challenging. And I don't know if we have any leeway on the dollars that we have left, but I'm just putting it out there as a consideration, as another source of funding.
Thank you. All right, great job, thanks.
Okay, and now we're going to transition into an update with the Climate Action Plan. And Ian Linson with the City Manager's Office is also going to join us. So quickly, we'll give an overview of the Mesa Climate Action Plan, kind of the path that we have put together to achieving the goals of the MCAP, how we're tracking the projects that are currently funded and underway. And then there has been $10 million that has been set aside for proposed projects for the Mesa Climate Action Plan. So just quickly to remind you with the aspirational goals, carbon neutrality is the #1 aspirational goal, 100% by 2050 of carbon neutrality and a 50% reduction by 2030. Renewable energy goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050. And then another aspirational goal #3 is to divert 90% of the waste from the landfill. And the last aspirational goal was to develop community-based action items to be incorporated into the plan.
This table shows how the city can achieve those MCAP aspirational goals, and it's setting milestones for year 2025, 2030, and 2050. So we're on target to get where we want to go with the goals. Carbon neutrality, the greenhouse gas emissions, 97,000 metric tons is considered our carbon footprint here in the city of Mesa. That came from the greenhouse gas inventory we did at that time. So we're looking to reduce that by about 25% by 2025, reduce it 50% by 2030, and down to 0 by 2050. There are existing projects underway and market conditions that are making this kind of an achievable path. I did want to mention that market conditions are very interesting right now. Both Energy Resources and SRP are reducing the carbon intensity of the energy that they provide us, and that is a big part of our emissions, is that emissions that are generated where the power is generated. We also, they closed the Navajo generating facility, so coal is no longer in the mix, which really helps to clean up the energy quite a bit. And then you'll notice when we propose some of the projects, they go right to carbon neutrality. With renewable energy in the city of Mesa, because we have 3 utilities and we have this opportunity to capture renewable natural gas and use it in our fleet, we actually look at renewable energy in terms of both electricity and renewable natural gas. So where did we stand when we adopted the plan in 2021? The systems that Scott mentioned, the distributed solar on-site facilities, that accounted for about 2% of our electrical energy use. With the addition of the sustainable energy offer that Scott mentioned from SRP, from the power purchase agreements that Energy Resources is using to really add renewable energy to their portfolio as well. And then some projects that we're talking about with different utilities about putting utility scale solar on pieces of land in Mesa that are really undevelopable. It's a great opportunity, perhaps, to put down some ground-mounted solar in those areas. We think if a lot of those things can come together, having 25% of our energy renewable is realistic. Getting to 50, again, we just have to keep putting plans in place to get there. Our ultimate goal is to be 100% renewable electric by 2050. Renewable natural gas, Scott is going to talk to you in a little bit about a project that his group is working on that's going to bring us up to 23% renewable natural gas, and then that hopefully will just be the first installment of a larger project. I did want to mention when perhaps my terms were not the best that I used under materials management. The city of Mesa has had, for city operations, a very robust recycling plan for at least 2 decades. So every office, recycles all of our office products. But what we're not doing is that we're not measuring it. We're not comparing it to the amount of material we purchase and to the amount that we recycle. So right now, Scott's team is looking on how can we measure that? How can we show what we have today? So we will put programs into place and move forward. I also should mention that Energy Resources and Transportation have a very comprehensive metal recycling plan. So all the street light poles, that's all metal and that's recyclable, and that's what's happening. So just being able to quantify it is where we are today. And one of the things that, as we move forward, think of this as our scorecard, and we want to be able to present to the community what we're doing. So we are tracking our data. What you see here is a little video from our data portal on the Healthy Environment Council Initiative webpage. This is tracking those. This is existing data that's collected today. It's near real time, updated on a monthly basis. Anybody in our community can go online and find out what's happening with our energy use. Where are we with renewable energy? All that information is right here on the data dashboard. Mesa's data team is working with us to actually expand this so we can include other initiatives that are underway. What's great about this website, if you have used it, is it allows individuals to really drill down into the data. What does that piece of that pie chart mean? What is that bar chart? Can you, with the energy, you can go down to an individual building and find out what the energy use is in that building. I did want to talk to you a little bit about projects that we already have underway. These are funded, they're on the books, they're ready to go. On the right is a pie chart. So we take the 97,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions we had. Well, what is that number mean? This pie chart tells us which operations have which percentage of that pie chart. So I wanted to first share with you an exciting partnership between Parks, Recreation, Community Facilities Department, and our Department of Innovation and Technology. Energy management systems have been installed in 40 buildings. They have 20 more in line to do. And those have installed smart systems that make sure that energy is used when it's needed, but it's not wasted in our city facilities. And as Scott mentioned, that's contributing to our reduction in energy use in city buildings. Solar projects, both Energy Resources and ESD are working on on-site solar projects. You've probably seen the solar installations right here in the downtown area. You're going to see a lot more covered canopies with solar happening shortly on city and city parking lots. Utility scale solar, again, working with SRP and the Sustainable Energy Offer. Those are the energy that we purchase from that Sustainable Energy Office is 100% renewable. We're paying the same cost as we would pay for a traditional energy. It's just a win-win all around. Let's see, what else is on the list? I wanted to mention equipment upgrades. So water distribution, it's the pumps, the plants. Greenfield plant recently installed a piece of equipment that actually regulates the motors, how they start and stop. And when you talk to Energy Resources about this project, they're very excited about how it's extending the life of the equipment. It allows them to manage it in a way and maintain it in a way they want to. For us, it meant they're saving 2.4 million kilowatt hours per year on energy use, just in the way they start that equipment. So that's very exciting. I did want to mention the smart utility meters. AMI recently had a presentation on that. In addition to many other benefits, we look at it as a way for all of our customers to get near real-time data on their water, gas, and electricity use. That is encouraging conservation once they have that information at their fingertips. Another wedge of the pie chart there is employee commute. And the city has adopted a teleworking policy which allows employees to reduce their commute miles driven. And the final bullet point there, but not the last project that we're working on, but just the last one we're going to highlight today, is fleet electrification. Ian and I are going to talk to you a little bit about that. I'll kick it off with our fleet electrification program. The fleet department purchased 2 plug-in electric hybrids that are in the fleet. They're being used by departments. Departments are checking them out, driving them, plugging them in, getting used to kind of the different model of having an EV, and that's very successful. The fleet department also reserved 29 EV Ford Lightnings. Those are the pickup trucks. They're very similar to the F-150, which is the workhorse of our fleet. Those are scheduled to arrive in October, so we are working on the design and soon the installation of charging stations at West Mesa Service Center, East Mesa Service Center, and additional sites as we move forward. Fleet electrification, we're kind of at the leading edge of this. It's more complicated than you would seem, and we are working closely with both Energy Resources and SRP to make sure that they have the power on their side of the meter when we're ready, and we've got our infrastructure to charge our trucks on our side of the meter. So it's a little bit of collaboration there. We have EV charging downtown, 11 existing stations. They've been upgraded with the latest technology. They're open to the public, they're fee-based. The 3 chargers that were on the Pepper Place parking lot, which has now become the Eco Mesa building, will be replaced in the parking garage there. So there was no net loss of city chargers. And we're working on installing 11 new chargers downtown at the City Plaza building and the Mesa Arts Center. And then, so that's kind of what we're doing now. That's what's happening today. We are working on master plans for how we can keep the momentum going as we move forward. So we have funding for a master plan to look at 68 city sites with fleet parking. An electrical engineer will assess the infrastructure, what do you need to upgrade it, also providing us with a cost estimate. There are some sites, as you can imagine, there's availability of power there, the SES panel has capacity, it's just a matter of installing the chargers. There are other sites that have many more challenges. So the city will be able to look at those and kind of prioritize and figure out what works best. And then for the second phase of the master plan, I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
Yeah, so thank you. So in parallel, as Laura mentioned, we're going to do a kind of a wider, broader outreach master plan for the Mesa community and for our regional partners. It's part of what you charged us with the climate action plan to engage the broader community. So it helps us achieve that goal, but it also kind of selfishly allows us to better access some of the federal funding that's coming our way. We become more competitive, have greater opportunity to get those funds when we work together, both with businesses within our community, but then with our municipal and other partners across the region. So we've already started some of this. We're very early in the community outreach process, but already talking to developers, trying to kind of get a better understanding of what they're looking to do with EV, obviously talking with SRP, actually fresh off the presses from SRP. They let us know there's about 2,700 EVs active in Mesa today, and I think it's our goal to get that number to be greatly increased. And so we can only do that with help from the broader community. We need to understand where these things are being used, but also today, so that we can help kind of accommodate the public charging for those current vehicles. But then we also want to know what's the desire and the need in the future. Where do people want to use these? Where do they want to go? And that'll kind of help us plan out the infrastructure for that in the future. So it's kind of an open call to the community to get in touch with us, let us know kind of what you're doing with this. We're going to be proactively reaching out to you, getting a better sense of what you're doing, and hopefully working together going forward.
And a very important part of that master plan, I guess I'd like to talk about, because equity and inclusion is definitely one of our goals with our climate action plan. As we look at parks and libraries and rights-of-way, those are places that are going to be open, accessible. Parks are distributed throughout our community. So if somebody lives in a townhome or they live in an older home that doesn't have the capacity to add a charger, we want to look at the feasibility of adding public charging fee-based out in our parks where we have city land. So those master plans are in need of some funding, though. So that takes me to the next, kind of rolls into the next slide kind of nicely. The city of Mesa, we put together a proposal for $10 million worth of MCAP projects that will help move us forward, in addition to the projects that are already funded. We created what we're calling a ranking tool so that we could take a look at the impact of these projects on climate action aspirational goals. Departments across the city are engaged. It's very exciting. We evaluated 50 projects in total. Just a quick overview of what the ranking tool contained. Projects were given points for their ability to address the aspirational goals of the plan: carbon neutrality, renewable energy, and materials management. Projects that were renewable energy projects were actually able to get twice as many points because they were fulfilling goal number 2, and then also helping us achieve goal number 1 of reducing emissions. So I just wanted you to know that we looked at each project uniquely. They could get multiple score points with that. We looked at the actual emission reduction of each proposal and took a look at that metric ton value, because remember that 97,000, we're trying to drive it down. So if a project had a larger metric ton reduction, that scored higher points. We have a feasibility factor in there, so those metric tons per $1,000 spent. So which projects reduced carbon for less money to actually install. So that was one of the factors we considered as a calculation. And again, we looked at the percentage of renewable, we looked at renewable energy as a percentage of the total energy we use. Points were added for that. And then also given some credit to projects that just increase the resiliency of our operations. Were they able to help us deal with natural disasters, flooding, excessive heat, long-term power outages? Again, did they address the on-site renewable energy that could be used in case we didn't have power otherwise? So that was also factored into the scoring system. So here are 5 projects that kind of floated to the top of that list. They scored very well. The Community EV Master Plan that Ian talked about scored very well, and we are looking for the funds of $200,000 to pay for a consultant to help us with that plan. Now, I am going to say that the contribution of that project is to both the community climate action plan and our city operations. It's really to help the community in addition to us, but I think it's important that we get started now. The Flair to Fuel project, it is an innovative project that Scott's going to tell you a little bit more about now. And the other 3, the lighting efficiency projects and solar, those are very traditional, tried and true ways of reducing our carbon emissions.
So just very quickly, the Flair to Fuel project, there was existing funding to this project. We've talked about it before, but we're at about 90% design. And as we've been meeting with the construction manager at risk, there's been significant cost increases that have happened with the project. I think we've seen that across the board with projects that are happening. This is the project, we've talked about it, this would be step 1 to a food waste to energy project. So this would help us meet all 3 aspirational goals as far as reducing carbon emissions, renewable energy produced, and avoiding things that are going to the landfill. And then, there's the energy projects that Laura had discussed previously too, whether those are energy efficiency or renewable energy projects with solar. So they go hand in hand together, because if we could reduce, as we showed on that chart before, if we reduce the amount of energy that we are using, but we're increasing the amount of renewable energy, just the math works out that you start having better percentages with the renewable energy and you're reducing your carbon emissions. So these, as Laura said, tried and true type projects that are in our wheelhouse that we're able to do. So here's the final slide that kind of talks about the impact of that $10 million we'll have on the proposed projects. And again, as we'll come back, and it's a promise to come back with the materials management side. The interesting part with materials management, we have gas meters, we have electric meters. It's a little bit more difficult when we collect from a bin and then we drive to another residence or another business and the waste gets mixed together. So we're working hard within the department to try and figure out a way that we can report this back better to the council. So with that, we're open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councilmember Spilsbury.
When we had our sustainability meeting, we talked a lot about the community engagement plan for this summer and what we were gonna do there. And that kind of seemed like we were gonna start there before we decided things on the others, I thought. So is this, community engagement really wasn't brought up here. So is, first of all, I guess, is there any money that's going towards the community engagement side, and where does that come from? And then are we waiting for community feedback before we make decisions about what we're doing? It sounds like you guys have kind of already figured out what the top projects should be.
So Mayor Council, this is really intended to be city projects.
Okay.
Right? The conversation you have with the community is broader, community-wide, what we do as a project. Now, Ian brought up the specifically on electric vehicle master planning about, where the electric vehicle charging stations should be across the entire city. So that's a community-wide. So that conversation is more as, what can the community do outside of the business of the city? These are specifically city, operational issues, right? And that community engagement we're having is the broader, what does the city as a community would like to do? So I think what we were proposing is setting aside $10 million that we can do as a, separate business, as a standalone business in Mesa. What can we do to commit to right now?
So we never were looking for feedback from the community on what the city should do, just that what we can do as a community.
Yeah, and I think at some point there'll be
individually.
some crossover. There'll probably be some policies or practices, whether it's tree planting or shade or other things the city can be part of. But as far as internal, lighting in city buildings or parks, that's what we're going to move forward with those as far as the city. But we are still going to have this broader conversation about what can the community do as a whole, whether it's whether it's businesses or residents. That's a conversation that engagement's all about.
Okay, and so where does the money fit in to do the community engagement part? It doesn't count as like one of these
No, I think
projects or
until we continue to fall through that conversation, right, with the community and bring those back to the council, I think in the summer, what's the time?
Yeah, we're looking at June.
June, then we can have that conversation, probably going into the next, and I don't know, because we don't know what that would be, right? And as I told internally, we wanted to take a low-hanging fruit that we could do right now and not wait for all those. We need it, because things we do as the city as an operation, it's not as the broader city, but as us, there's things we can do right now.
Okay.
Mr. Reddia.
Scott, on the Flair to Fuel project, what's the capacity that you're looking at for this project? Because is this the project where we get waste to convert it into, in our digesters to convert it into the fuel piece, or am I mixing up the?
Yes, so this would be this first phase of that project is taking existing biogas that is produced in the anaerobic digesters from the municipal sewage that's treated at the plant. But we're sizing the system so that when we add food waste in the future, it'll approximately double the amount of gas that's produced from there, and it's about 12,000 tons that we'd be able to take over a year period. Depending on what the digesters, that's from the feasibility study that we had done before, and it would be about twice as much gas that would be produced from it.
Initiative, this is talking about the gas that's already
in the system.
It's getting burned off.
Right, that's why.
Today.
So we refer to it as flare to fuel because currently it actually goes through a flare and it's being burned off. So this will take it, and it's the methane is what we're looking for to put into the natural gas system. So just, that ties in with the algae project a little bit that ASU was doing. ASU is interested in the carbon dioxide. So those are the two main components that are in that gas. So that's why that project works out very well, because they're interested in a component that's in the gas that we don't have a need for right now, whereas we're interested in the methane side. Eventually, hopefully that technology could get to a point that it acts actually as that scrubbing system. But that's probably many years down the road before it's to a scale that it would be able to do that.
Okay. And this project is to set up that portion to what we're capturing, we're not capturing currently, right?
It's currently being created today. The methane is a natural process. And it's being burned today. So it's happening right now. So this would capture that, scrub it, and then we have a way to convert that to real value to the city.
Okay.
And so that's first phase. Second phase could be then, I just want to kind of separate that, because
Yep.
that's something that's happening right now,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Then second phase could be, we could then, if we could look at the option of creating where we're kind of creating and feeding our own system to create the organic, the food waste,
food
that add addition to that. But
Okay.
this is really focused on what was already coming off the system today, putting that through the scrubbers, converting that into a product that we can then create value for.
Okay, makes sense. All right. And then on the question, on the, what do we call it, the community-wide electric vehicle piece, what's the ending product that we're looking at? Is it just creating a plan to then shop around for federal funding, to partnerships with our community members, mapping out, is there an idea to map out across the city what residents can use as far as a local park or a gas station or somewhere else? Is that an idea that we're looking into, or it's all in one, or what's the ending product for this 200,000 that we're looking to invest in?
Yeah.
I guess that's my first question, and how do we then move forward?
Mayor and Councilmember Heredia, I mean, all of the above really
Sure.
is the quick answer, but the point is, because we know we're gonna be investing in some infrastructure already, there's some economies of scale where we have certain sites that can be, that are already accessed by the public, and so we wanna make sure we maximize that portion, but then beyond that, we know that there is an opportunity today to go after some federal funding if you have an idea, a better idea of where kind of the need is or the lack of resources are. And so in this plan, we hope to kind of have an understanding of really everything that you said. I don't want to hate to promise the world, because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but that is exactly the idea, and just have a better, so that, I give the example, we don't want a Fry's to install 25 chargers and then the Home Depot next door, put another 25 chargers right next to each other. We kind of want some coordination so that you most efficiently kind of allocate those resources. But yeah, and it's going to be an evolving process as we learn, but the idea is to learn all of those things that you mentioned.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
I just wanted to make a comment to anybody listening in. This presentation is very focused on what we're doing on our city operations and facilities and such like that, and our commitment to the plan. But anybody interested, the Climate Action Plan online is only like 22 pages or so, very easy to read and has some images, and I suggest looking that over, because it addresses so much more that we know is part of the Climate Action Plan, like heat mitigation and our water conservation and air quality and so many other things. And so our Climate Action Plan is more comprehensive than just looking at our city operations. This is our commitment to what we're doing, but we need the community involved in order to make changes and progress on all the factors that lead to climate change. I need to correct myself when I mentioned the use of ARPA dollars for MRF. I looked back at my notes, it was the anticipation of the Build Back Better being passed at the time, which we
I
know
was
was
kind of thinking, I was
suspended.
trying to remember which section said that, so I'm glad
Yeah,
you clarified
Build
that.
Back
'Cause we
Better.
were-
And I know that if that actually gets passed, there might be a lot of grant opportunities that could offset some of these costs for our facilities and what we can do in the community. I think that's it. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I know you guys have been working super hard because of all the issues and stuff, but the Climate Action Plan and everything you've done, and I commend your entire team, is excellent. I really like the progress. You've made a huge amount of progress in a short amount of time in a very digestible way that is easy to comprehend. So thank you.
Many, many hands. Yes.
Yeah, I'll say amen to that. I'm proud of our climate action plan very much, and more than being proud of the plan, I'm proud that it's being implemented and that all of the departments in the city, not just sustainability, but everybody in the room has taken ownership of this, and you're finding ways to implement it in your departments. Thank you very much. A couple questions on the presentation. I think it said 17% of our carbon came from streetlights, I guess our city carbon production. I know we're shifting to LD lighting. I know it's brighter and it's better, but is it also more energy
Yes,
efficient?
It's definitely more efficient, and it also, my understanding in talking to the gentleman who's overseeing this program, they actually have the ability to adjust the lighting levels.
Okay.
Now, that 17%, in all honesty.
I'm sorry, it's 18%. I don't want-
18%.
yes.
We went back to data from 2019 because 2020 was such an odd year. So transportation has been working on that project, so no doubt when we do this inventory again,
That's
it
great.
will be much less. So
Okay,
you're doing a
yeah,
great
I
job.
was hopeful that that's.
Yes.
We could, that's a place we can actually expect to see some improvement, isn't it?
Definitely.
On the electric vehicle charging stations, I love this, coming up with the plan. And Ian, like you just said, well, I think it's important that we coordinate on a regional level with that plan, because just like we don't want the Walmart and the Target to have stations next to each other, we don't want to have stations across the street from Tempe, right? So hopefully at MAG, we can help folks realize that a lot of that planning needs to take place there. The 68 fleet chargers, are those, the fleet we're talking about is the City of Mesa fleet, correct? So-
Sites, yes, 68 sites.
Thank you. And then I think Frankie asked this question on the Flair to fuel, but with that $5 million investment, I know you said we're getting twice as much methane, scrubbed methane out of that, for use in our solid waste vehicles, I presume. What percent will our fleet be? How do I explain that to people? How big an impact is that? Are we going from 1 truck to 2 trucks, or are we going from 12 trucks to 24 trucks? I don't.
So currently we don't have, we did have a contract, I guess I'll correct. We did have a contract for a period of time that we were what's called an off-taker of renewable natural gas, so that a landfill could qualify for the RIN credits that we want to qualify for in the future. But with this project, once the system comes online at the Northwest plant, it'll be about 40% of the solid waste fleet. It was, when we first started talking about this, I would use 50% as the number, but as you see, we've added some trucks, some growth trucks that have been added over the years. So right now, it would be about 40% of the fleet that would be fueled with renewable natural gas.
That's
Gas that we're already
yeah.
producing, right? It's already
It's a good story, and the alternative is we just would be burning it off.
which is what we've been doing for decades, so.
Since it was built.
Since it was built.
Well, and also, I guess I would say, though, there is a cogen that's on site. We have produced energy, electricity on site, but there have been some issues with it because it wasn't clean gas. So we were just running raw biogas through that, and the Caterpillar engine got a little beat up over the years with that gas. So, but with the system that we're putting in
Little
place
corrosive.
and working with Energy Resources, this gas that we'll be putting into our utility will be the same as any other gas that's in there, so.
Great. Thank you. Okay, and I think it asked for direction, but I think you've got.
No, yeah,
direction on
this is just part of the budget presentation, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Moving on then, next item on our agenda is the current events and conferences attended. Council, I know you've been busy. Who would like to share? Anything since last Thursday? Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Well, I think we all forgot. No,
Yeah.
we didn't forget, but we all attended. Most of us were at the Mesa Public Schools Foundation dinner and fundraiser on Thursday evening. On Friday, I attended a Women in Municipal Government, an MLC board meeting. And thank you, Mayor and Julie, and for hosting the Easter pageant at the temple. We went on Friday evening, and that was a very, very nice event. I don't know how, is it still going on? Is it still ongoing? No, it's done.
Saturday.
Okay, have to catch it next year. Okay. And then on Saturday, I attended the Reed Park Easter event that Fiesta Substation Police Department puts on for the neighborhood. The kids look forward to it every year. Of course, we haven't had it the last couple of years, so they were just thrilled to have it back. A lot of community members showed up, and we had Easter eggs and popcorn and donuts, all kinds of stuff. And the Easter Bunny was there, and he made his appearance the day before Easter. So thank you to everybody involved at the Fiesta. You made a difference in the lives of so many families, and I thank you for all your hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just underscore what you said about the Easter pageant at the temple. Over 10,000 people a night for 2 weeks. It was,
the
last few nights were 15. So that's just the impact on our, it's fun to see the resources and the infrastructure in downtown being utilized, and light rail and the parks, and Mesa has the capacity to put on some pretty significant events. So that was.
Pete's Fish and Chips kept up with it.
I bet there was a lot of Pete's Fish and Chips sold. Yeah. That's true, yeah. I appreciated Friday night, the opportunity to offer the invocation. So, yeah, it's fun to have that back. If there's nothing else, the next item on our agenda, Mr. Brady is updating us on our schedule.
Yes, Mayor and Council, we'll see you Thursday for our continuing discussion about the budget on Thursday morning. Thank you.
Great. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned, and we'll reconvene in just a minute or two upstairs.